What's good, YouTube? It is your boy Thesis, aka Thesis himself from Vaping with Thesis. That's right, God bless it. Now look, Hawkeye smother truck. Oh shit, I can take my safety glasses off. Hawkeye smother truck is now peep game, son. The reason why I'm in the shop today is because in Minnesota, the day that the snow melts, it is like Groundhog Day. No one wants to go inside, so that's no different for me. So I've been outside for like the past, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 days. Non-stop, and I'm not going inside. I don't give a fuck. I also got to swap out the GPU on the Mac, and with that being said, I'll probably make a video about it, throw it up on the Patreon page. The other reason why I'm in the shop is for this. There's no other place that I want to use a pod system than in the garage. The Y0U, the MyPod, the Smoant S8, all of those follow me into the garage, into the shop. Doesn't matter what I'm doing, if I'm riding the bike, it doesn't, all that kind of good stuff. This is specifically where these devices shine. So with that being said about the truck, let's just go and get close up with the Smoant S8. Welcome to Up Close and Personal with your boy Thesis. Now peep game, son. Today we have got the Smoant S8. It's my second favorite device from Smoant of all time. I really don't have much to complain about with Smoant. Smoant's always treated me well. Smoant's always done a damn good job on their devices. And with that being said, this says a lot, the fact that this is my second favorite. And if I were to be completely honest, this is probably the most practical Smoant mod that I've ever had. If you take a look at the RA box, it really wasn't that practical. In fact, I eventually tore it apart and then made a Qbert mod that I sent to VapingWithThesis on his channel. He actually shouted it out. Huge appreciation to that. Let's open up the box first and foremost. All right, so now that we got the box open, let's go and take a look exactly how you receive it, like this. You got some of your instructions here. Bam, absolutely beautiful. Light indications or light notifications. I'm glad that they did this. There's several different lights and different codes that you will have to learn if you're gonna have this device. Everything from the flashing red, everything from how many times it flashes. It reminds me of Morse code, which granted, that's really standard in terms of a pod system. That's the way most pods work. So if you're using a pod system as is, then you'll definitely get an understanding of how this bad boy works. What you're gonna notice that kind of annoyed me in the beginning is, I'm hoping you guys can see this bubble. You see that bubble right there? And on this side, it looks almost empty. That shit was annoying to me because I couldn't fill both sides evenly. What I had to end up by doing is figuring out that I have to do this weird rotation thing, and whilst I'm filling it, this side of the reservoir fills, this side stays empty, so I have to end up by going like this and kind of smacking it like that and let the bubble draw upwards. And when it did that, it ended up by working no problem whatsoever. Then I was able to fill both sides without having any issues. When you're filling this up like this, you will see this side fill first. What I did was I just left it open and then I kind of tilted it and waited for this side of the reservoir to drain into that side of the reservoir. Again, it's kind of rudimentary. I wish there was a different way that they would have done that. It's not a huge complaint because once it's full for quite some time. I've been able to get a couple of days out of these tanks. The magnets on here are strong enough. I wish there was a little bit more of a click. It would just feel more secure. Even if it's just a psychological thing, I much prefer that. When this is dropped, this reservoir does tend to pop out. Again, it's not a big deal. It does work both ways. Flip her around. Gorgeousness. Now, usually this is a goodies bag, but in this case, it is just a bottle, and you got your small ass USB charger. Now, the bottles that it does come with, it's so funny. A lot of you cats that have been a veteran of vaping for years, such as myself, these things, man, I had so many of these, but I threw them all away because back in the day, we would use cargo tanks, and not just cargo tanks, but you would use this to fill virtually all of your tanks. Like, this is the way you would fill a K-Fun. And back in the day, this was a necessity. This is now coming back, and I still think it's kind of hilarious how shit is cyclical like that. This thing is interesting in that they call it elegant, and I think the exact word was robust. The first word that I would think of when I look at this mod is not robust. Is it elegant? 100%. This thing looks, feels, and handles itself with a lot of class. And I know that's kind of a strange thing to say about an inanimate object, but it just does. And again, I know it's sort of an abstract way to look at an object, but it just feels that way. It feels so nice in the hand. And the amount of vapor production that this thing produces is a fair amount. It's not the biggest clouds, obviously, because you're not doing a direct to lung necessarily. It is technically an MTL. Again, this is the same problem I've had with dozens of pod systems, aside from maybe the Y0U, is that most of them to me are not truly MTLs. And I know that they have to appeal to a wide audience because everyone's MTL is a little bit different. For me, myself personally, I like a little bit of a tighter draw. It's not a big deal because once this thing gets broken in, the MTL on it is pretty damn close to being perfect. So when I was testing out the charge time on this bad boy, it really wasn't a long time. I want to say it was close to an hour. It does charge at a 0.5 amp, so 500 milliamp hour rate. Now that's what they're claiming it to be. I was getting a little bit less at times. I was getting closer to around 450. And I know that they're rounding up. That's not a big deal for me. The fact that it's charging that fast on a battery that's only 370 milliamp hour, that's pretty damn quick. quick. These reservoirs do hold 2 milliliters, and I do vape a 59 milligram nicotine salt in here. So with that being said, I don't have to take as many hits as you would if you were vaping, say, a 40 or a 30 milligram nicotine salt. This is draw activated. There's no button. It is a pressure switch that is located, bam, right there, dead center. The connections that are on here are gold plated. Again, that's something they don't have to do. The fact that they're doing it does lead me to believe that they're taking their time in their devices, and the fact that they actually care about the connection, that's a solid thing to see. 1.3 ohm atomizer resistance. Again, that is a perfect resistance for something that's going to be used at 370 milliamp hours. Not a lot of battery life if you were going to have something below 1 ohm. So 1.3, perfect, right where I need to be. It does have charging protection, low battery indicator, charging protection, short circuit protection, overuse protection, which is always a good thing. As a matter of fact, something I noticed when this was sitting out in the sun the other day when I was working on the bike, I had this sitting atop the seat on my dirt bike. The ambient air temperature wasn't that high, it was like 65. But once this was sitting on that seat and black on black and that sun was just beating on it for about an hour or so, I went to take a puff and it would not work. It was just blinking. So I would assume that that would have to do over heat protection, put it back in the shade, back underneath the bike where the shade was. I would say maybe in 4 or 5 minutes, I went to take a puff and it was working just fine. But one of the best features about this device is the fact that it's an open pod system. It's a lot like the MyPod in that you can refill these without any hassle, and it's readily available. Now, my personal opinion about this bad boy is I like it. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorite mods that Smoant's come out with, and I would really like to see a second version just addressing the issue of the MTL status. I wish that the MTL was a little bit tighter. Now, again, I don't know if we're going to actually see that because people seem to be satisfied with the MTL draw that's on these reservoirs, as well as something like the MePod and the MyPod, however you want to pronounce it, and something like the Z0U. The Z0U tends to be the best MTL that I've used. This one is probably second best. In terms of battery life, they're pretty damn close. In terms of flavor, if you have something like the MyPod, that's a hard one. I want to say that the only reason why the MyPod would win against this is because the airflow seems to be more open. With this, it's not quite as open, but at the same time, that's what I prefer. I prefer there to be a much tighter draw. Again, this is definitely a recommendation I would make for an all-day vape. This is definitely a recommendation I would make for someone who's trying to quit smoking. This is absolutely 100% an all-day vape. Hawkeye, smell the truckers. Now, with that being said, let's go and get back to regular view, son. So my final summation is this. The Smoant S8 is going to be for someone who wants an open pod system that isn't the norm. So you look at the MyPod. The MyPod's around 50-some bucks with extra coils. This is a little bit less expensive than that. You're talking $26 for the actual device itself. It's extremely easy to fit in your pocket. I want to say that it's smaller than the MyPod, but it's really not. The MyPod has a smaller footprint. However, the design of this being so thin, look how thin this is real quick. Let it focus in, bam. See how thin that is? That is insane. I mean, it's by far and away the thinnest device I've ever used. With that being said, that's why I use it in the shop. That's why I use it when I'm on the dirt bike. That's why I use it when I'm on the ATV. So if you're in the market for something that's tiny, that's thin, paper thin, this is where it's gonna be at. For me, myself personally, this is Smoant's second best mod that I've ever used. I cannot including mods I haven't used by Smoant, but the RA box and then the Smoant S8, those two devices, in my opinion, are by far and away the best Smoant products I've ever used. I love this thing. For the price, you cannot beat it. $26 on VapingWithThesis.com. Again, I would highly suggest using a nicotine salt. For me, this works best with a 50-50 blend or a nicotine salt. Hawkeye, smell the truckers. Now, with that being said, I'm gonna tell y'all that I appreciate y'all for vaping with Thesis. It is your boy Thesis. I'm out.